Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into MicroStrategy and their big bet on Bitcoin. We've got a ton of interesting sources lined up for this one. Articles, interviews, even some clips from congressional hearings, all about to get expertly broken down, of course.
You know what I think is so interesting here? It's that MicroStrategy, which is, a business intelligence company, they've basically turned into a Bitcoin powerhouse.
It really is a fascinating case study, isn't it? I mean, they've been buying up Bitcoin since 2020, spending billions to become what some are calling a pure play Bitcoin treasury. So our mission today is to really try to understand why they're doing this.
Yeah.
Why are institutions even paying attention to this? And will this gamble actually pay off in the end?
Yeah, so let's start by sort of unpacking MicroStrategy's playbook here. They've poured over $4 billion into Bitcoin, and at one point actually held the largest Bitcoin treasury globally. Now their CEO, Michael Saylor, he is a huge Bitcoin advocate, calls it digital Manhattan.
He even predicts that Bitcoin will hit $13 million per coin in 21 years. Now, that is quite a prediction. So what's the logic? What is the logic behind this really bold strategy?
Well, Saylor believes that Bitcoin is moving from being just a niche asset to becoming a dominant force in global finance. Like, he actually sees it going from something like 0.1% of global money to a huge 7%.
Uh-oh.
He argues that Bitcoin offers a 29% annualized return, which, vastly outperforms traditional assets.
So they're betting big on Bitcoin's future potential. But something I don't get is, why not just let institutions buy Bitcoin directly? What's
Well,
the point of going through MicroStrategy?
That's a really great question. And it actually gets to the heart of why MicroStrategy has become so interesting to institutional investors. There are a few big advantages that they offer. First off, they have access to capital at these amazingly low interest rates. I mean, something that just regular investors like you and me could only dream of. And they can use this to just buy up Bitcoin in huge quantities.
Right. It's like they're getting a wholesale discount on the future of finance.
Yeah, exactly. Second, some institutions, they face these regulatory hurdles when they try to buy Bitcoin directly. So investing in MicroStrategy lets them basically sidestep those restrictions while still gaining exposure to Bitcoin's price movements.
So it's a way to kind of navigate that whole regulatory maze. So what else makes MicroStrategy so attractive to these institutions?
So the third advantage is all about the leverage and options that MicroStrategy stock offers. Institutional investors, they can really amp up their potential gains through things like leverage trading and option strategies, which you can't really do with Bitcoin ETFs right now.
So it's like a turbocharged way to invest in Bitcoin. One thing that kept coming up in our research was this idea of a premium attached to MicroStrategy stock. Can you kind of unpack that? What does that even mean?
So basically, some people believe that MicroStrategy stock, it trades at a price that's actually higher than the value of the Bitcoin they're holding. It's like the market is giving extra value to the company itself, and that difference, that's what people are calling the premium.
So then the big question is, will this premium actually last? Could it just disappear and then hurt investors who bought in at that higher price?
That's the million-dollar question for sure. And, our sources actually present arguments from both sides. Some believe that the premium is totally justified because of MicroStrategy's structure, Saylor's leadership, and the fact that Bitcoin has a limited supply. They argue that all these things make MicroStrategy just a more appealing investment than, just holding Bitcoin directly.
So they're saying MicroStrategy brings something unique to the table. It's not just a pile of Bitcoin.
Right, exactly. But on the other hand, you have the skeptics, and they're arguing that as more Bitcoin investment products come out, like ETFs, this premium could start to disappear. And they actually point to these analysts who are shorting MicroStrategy, basically betting on this premium compression.
So they're basically saying that as Bitcoin becomes easier for people to buy, the perceived value of MicroStrategy is going to go down.
Yeah, pretty much. And BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, they're building their Bitcoin holdings through their ETF. And that could have an effect on MicroStrategy's premium as well.
Well, that's a lot to unpack. So where does all this leave us? Is MicroStrategy a smart investment, or is it a risky gamble?
Well, here's something interesting to think about. Even if that premium does shrink, MicroStrategy could still win big if their long-term Bitcoin bet pays off. It all comes down to whether you believe in the future of Bitcoin.
So it's not just about the company, it's about the underlying asset itself. That's a question each investor has to answer for themselves.
Absolutely. To understand MicroStrategy's strategy, you really need to understand Bitcoin's potential. And we got to explore both sides of the argument to make an informed decision.
So it seems like MicroStrategy is walking this tightrope. They're trying to leverage their position, But at the same time, they're in this really volatile market,
Yeah.
and the regulations are all over the place.
Yeah, and their success really hinges on a few key things, like we were just talking about that perceived premium on their stock. Everyone's watching that. And the fact that there are these other ways to invest in Bitcoin now, like ETFs, that could really eat away at that premium and make them less attractive to some investors.
Right, and BlackRock jumping into the Bitcoin ETF game, that definitely adds another layer of complexity to the whole thing. What else should we be keeping an eye on?
Well, the regulatory landscape is a big one. It's constantly changing, and that creates a lot of uncertainty for MicroStrategy, and that translates into risk for their operations.
Yeah, our sources actually highlighted some pretty heated debates in Congress about crypto regulation. Some lawmakers want a hands-off approach,
Yeah.
and others are pushing for stricter rules, to protect investors and prevent fraud.
Exactly. Like Congressman Emmer, he was really frustrated with the SEC's lack of clear guidance. He argued that it's actually stifling innovation.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you have SEC Chair Gensler, and he's really stressing the need for investor protection and highlighting those potential risks that come with this new asset class.
It's like trying to find that balance, between encouraging innovation, but also making sure that investors are protected.
Absolutely. And all this regulatory uncertainty, it just adds another layer of risk for anyone thinking about investing in MicroStrategy. I mean, any new regulations could really impact their business model and their future prospects.
So it's not just a bet on Bitcoin. It's also a bet on whether MicroStrategy can navigate all of this.
Right. Now let's dig a little deeper into Michael Saylor's reasoning here. He really believes that Bitcoin is not just some speculative asset. He thinks it's a total revolution, a paradigm shift in how our financial system works.
Yeah, he calls it digital Manhattan. Like it has the potential to become this global financial hub. But what are the actual arguments behind that?
Well, Saylor argues that Bitcoin is just a better form of money compared to those traditional fiat currencies. He points to the fact that it's decentralized, it has a fixed supply, and it's resistant to things like censorship and inflation.
Right, and he also highlights those impressive returns that Bitcoin has generated, saying it blows traditional assets out of the water.
Yeah, but we got to remember that past performance doesn't guarantee future results. Bitcoin has had incredible growth, but it's also known for being super volatile.
True. It's high risk, but also high reward.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to that question. Is MicroStrategy's strategy genius or madness?
Well, the answer probably depends on your own risk tolerance and how much you believe in Bitcoin's long-term potential.
Right, if you think Bitcoin is going to become mainstream, then MicroStrategy might seem like a smart way to get in on that.
Yeah, but if you're not so sure about Bitcoin, or if you're not comfortable with a lot of risk, their approach might seem way too reckless.
I mean, our sources paint a picture of a company that's putting everything on the line,
Yeah.
betting on this super volatile asset, and operating in this space where the rules are still being written.
It's true. And investors really need to consider both the potential upside and the potential downside. MicroStrategy's stock price is tied to the price of Bitcoin, so it can swing wildly.
Exactly. And if Bitcoin takes a major hit
Mm-hmm.
and stays down for a while,
That could have a huge impact on MicroStrategy's balance sheet and their stock price.
and there's a whole debt issue. MicroStrategy borrowed a lot of money to buy all that Bitcoin.
Yeah, and our sources pointed out that debt could become a real burden if interest rates go up a lot, or if the price of Bitcoin drops sharply.
So it's a leveraged bet, which means the potential gains are bigger, but so are the potential losses. So we've got this company, MicroStrategy, diving headfirst into Bitcoin, taking on all this debt, and operating in this regulatory gray area. It's a pretty bold move, wouldn't you say?
It definitely is. And it kind of makes you wonder, is this a sustainable model? Can other institutions invest in Bitcoin the same way MicroStrategy is doing it? Or is this just a unique situation because of Michael Saylor and his beliefs about Bitcoin?
Well, our sources did mention that other companies are exploring similar strategies, but none of them have gone as far as MicroStrategy.
That's true. MicroStrategy is really in a league of their own when you look at how much Bitcoin they're holding and how central Bitcoin is to their entire strategy.
It's like they've become the Bitcoin company.
Hmm.
But what if their bet doesn't pay off? What if Bitcoin doesn't reach those crazy price predictions?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? If we see a long bear market for Bitcoin, it would definitely put a strain on MicroStrategy's finances.
Yeah, their stock price could plummet. Their debt could become a huge problem, and their entire future could be at risk.
Exactly. It's a high-risk, high-reward situation, and it's really important for investors to understand that MicroStrategy isn't just a stand-in for Bitcoin.
Right. Investing in MicroStrategy comes with its own set of risks. It's more complicated than just buying Bitcoin directly.
Yeah, their success hinges on a few things. Not just how Bitcoin performs, but also how well they manage their debt, how they navigate the regulatory landscape,
Yeah.
and whether they can keep investors on board.
It's such a fascinating case study. You see the potential for disruption that cryptocurrencies bring. You see how a traditional company can totally reinvent itself. And it makes you think about what the future of finance will look like.
And it raises those really important questions that investors and regulators are grappling with. What's the future of Bitcoin? How should we regulate this new asset class? What role will companies like MicroStrategy play in shaping the financial system?
So what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
I think the big takeaway is that MicroStrategy's story really shows us how powerful cryptocurrencies can be. It's a perfect example of how a traditional company can transform itself by embracing a new asset class.
And it underscores how important it is to understand both the risks and the opportunities in this emerging market.
Whether you invest in Bitcoin directly or through a company like MicroStrategy, you need to be careful. You need to really understand the technology, the market dynamics, and the regulations.
In the end, the decision of whether or not to invest in MicroStrategy or Bitcoin is a personal one. But hopefully this deep dive has given you the information you need to make a more informed decision.
And as the world of finance keeps changing, we encourage you to stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the exciting world of digital assets.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into MicroStrategy and their Bitcoin bet. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge.